The shriek that pierced the morning air could have shattered windows. I looked up from watering my rose bushes to see Karen Fitzgerald, our HOA board president, rattling the padlock on my new gate like a caged animal. Her face had turned the same shade of red as my custom diamond pattern driveway, the very one she had tried to claim as common property just 3 weeks earlier. She stood there in her designer swimsuit and cover-up, pool bag dangling from her shoulder, realizing her favorite shortcut to the community pool was now permanently blocked. I turned back to my roses, allowing myself the smallest of smiles. Sometimes justice comes in the form of a $1.20 padlock from the hardware store. My name is Jake Sullivan, and I'm a 42-year-old veteran who spent 15 years in the Army Corps of Engineers. When I finally settled down in the quiet suburb of Meadowview Heights, I thought my days of territorial disputes were behind me. I purchased a beautiful corner lot home specifically because of its unique features, including an oversized driveway that wrapped around the property's edge. During construction, I had paid an extra $12.00 to have custom red diamond pavers installed instead of standard concrete. The pattern wasn't just aesthetic. It was a tribute to the unit insignia from my military days. The driveway bordered HOA-maintained land that included a walking path to the shared community pool, but every inch of those red diamonds sat firmly within my property lines. Karen Fitzgerald moved into the neighborhood 2 years before me, and had somehow parlayed her position as HOA board member into a personal fiefdom. At 53, she treated the community like her kingdom, with rules that seemed to change based on her mood. Her husband barely spoke. Her 2 adult children visited only on holidays, and she filled her days by measuring grass height with a ruler and photographing trash cans left out past noon. The day I met her, she introduced herself by informing me that my moving truck was parked 2 inches over the approved time limit. I should have known then what I was dealing with, but I foolishly believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. The trouble started 6 months after I moved in. I was working from home when I heard the distinctive click-clack of heels on my driveway. Karen stood there with a clipboard photographing my pavers from multiple angles. When I stepped outside to ask what she was doing, she informed me in a syrupy, sweet voice that my driveway was under review for multiple violations. According to her, the red diamond pattern violated the neighborhood's uniformity standards. Worse, she claimed the driveway encroached on HOA common land. She suggested the distinctive pattern might confuse delivery drivers or emergency services. Though how red diamonds could be more confusing than standard gray concrete remained a mystery she couldn't explain. I politely but firmly told her that the driveway had been approved by the developer before construction and that I had all the necessary permits. She waved her hand dismissively and said that previous approvals could be overturned if the board deemed them problematic. When I refused to even consider replacing my $12.00 custom driveway with plain concrete, her fake smile vanished. She warned me that the HOA had ways of dealing with non-compliant homeowners and strutted back down my driveway, making sure to step on every single paver with her designer heels. The next morning, I found a bright orange violation notice taped to my front door. The fine was $200 for unapproved modifications to property visible from the street. I removed it and found another one underneath for another $200, this one for creating a potential safety hazard. By the end of the week, I had accumulated $100 in fines for a driveway that had existed before I even bought the house. But the fines were just the beginning of Karen's campaign. She started using my driveway as her personal shortcut to the community pool, claiming that, since it was in dispute, she had every right to assess it regularly. Every morning at exactly 9:30, she would strut across my red diamonds in her swimsuit and sarong, sometimes even dragging her pool chair's wheels across the pavers. When I installed a small no trespassing sign, she had it removed within hours, claiming it violated HOA signage rules. When I confronted her about using my driveway, She smiled and said she was conducting official HOA business, inspecting the alleged encroachment. She even started bringing other board members on her daily inspections, turning my driveway into a tourist attraction. One morning, I caught her directing a landscaping truck to park on my pavers while they worked on the adjacent common area. When I protested, she claimed the driveway was about to become HOA property anyway, so I might as well get used to it. The situation escalated when Karen filed an official motion with the HOA board to seize a portion of my property as an easement for access. She claimed that the community needed guaranteed access to the pool path and that my driveway's location made it the logical choice. The motion included a proposal to remove the red diamond pavers and replace them with standard HOA, approved concrete at my expense. She even had the audacity to suggest that I should be grateful for the improvement to my property's value. The special board meeting to discuss the motion was scheduled for the following month, giving me exactly 30 days to prepare my defense. I knew I needed professional help, so I hired Patricia Lawson, a property attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. Her first action was to request all documentation from the county regarding my property lines and the original subdivision plans. What we discovered was better than I could have hoped. Not only was every inch of my red diamond driveway well within my property boundaries, but the developer's original plans showed that they had intentionally designed the lot to include extra space specifically for an expanded driveway. The county surveyor's official records confirmed that the HOA common land ended a full 3 feet from where my pavers began. Patricia also discovered something interesting in the HOA-owned bylaws. According to Section 12:4, any board member who knowingly makes false claims about property boundaries or initiates frivolous legal action against homeowners can be subject to removal and personal liability for legal fees. Armed with this information, we hired a licensed surveyor to create an updated property map with clear markers. The surveyor installed bright orange stakes along the true property line, making it impossible for anyone to claim confusion about where my land ended and HOA property began. While waiting for the surveyor's official report, I documented every instance of Karen's trespassing with my security cameras. The footage showed her crossing my driveway at least twice daily, often stopping to make phone calls or chat with other neighbors while standing on my red diamonds. One video even captured her telling another resident that, once the board approved the easement, she planned to have a bench installed on what was currently my property. The level of entitlement was staggering, but it would ultimately be her downfall. With the surveyor's report in hand and my attorney's guidance, I made my next move. Over a weekend, when Karen was visiting her sister out of state, I had a professional fencing company install a decorative iron fence along my property line. The fence included an automatic gate where my driveway met the street and a smaller pedestrian gate with a sturdy padlock where the property bordered the pool path. The installation was completely legal, permitted by the county, and didn't violate any HOA rules about fence height or style. When Karen returned Monday morning for her usual pool trek, she discovered that her shortcut had vanished behind iron bars and a very secure lock. The explosion was immediate and spectacular. She called my phone 17 times in the span of an hour, leaving increasingly unhinged voicemails about illegal structures and blocking community access. She threatened to have my fence torn down, to sue me personally, and to make my life a living hell until I complied with her demands. I saved every single message and forwarded them to Patricia, who was building quite a file on Karen's behavior. By noon, Karen had called an emergency HOA board meeting for that evening, confident that her fellow board members would support her crusade against my fence. The meeting was held in the community center and the room was packed. Word had spread about the conflict, and many residents came to watch the drama unfold. Karen stood at the podium, her face flushed with anger as she ranted about my deliberate obstruction of community property and my antisocial behavior. She claimed I had installed the fence out of spite, and that it prevented residents from accessing their own amenities. When it was my turn to speak, I calmly presented the surveyor's report, the county records, and the original developer's plans. I explained that I had every right to fence my property and that the HOA had never had any claim to my driveway. Patricia then took the floor and delivered the killing blow. She presented Karen's motion to seize my property alongside evidence that Karen knew the property lines were accurate. She showed the board Karen's own emails from 2 years prior where she had acknowledged the correct property boundaries in a dispute with a different homeowner. Patricia explained that Karen's current actions constituted harassment, trespassing, and potentially fraud. She also reminded the board about Section 12, 4 of their own bylaws, and the personal liability they could face if they supported Karen's baseless claims. The board members looked increasingly uncomfortable as Patricia laid out the evidence. When she finished, the board president, a mild-mannered retiree named Robert Garrison, called for a brief recess. During the break, I watched as the other board members huddled together, occasionally glancing at Karen, who stood alone by the podium, her arms crossed and foot tapping impatiently. When the meeting reconvened, Robert cleared his throat and announced that the board had reached a decision. They were dismissing all fines against me, rejecting the proposed easement, and issuing a formal apology for the harassment I had endured. But the residents weren't done. A woman named Sandra Chen stood up and made a motion for a vote of no confidence in Karen Fitzgerald as a board member. She cited the abuse of power, the false claims, and the potential legal liability Karen had brought upon the HOA. The motion was seconded immediately, and despite Karen's sputtering protests about proper procedures and notice requirements, Robert allowed the vote to proceed. When the ballots were counted, the vote was 87-12 in favor of removing Karen from the board. I watched as the color drained from her face, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water as the reality sank in. The aftermath was swift and satisfying. Karen was not only removed from the board but also received a formal cease and desist letter from the HOA attorney warning her against any further harassment of homeowners. She now had to walk an extra 3 blocks around the neighborhood to reach the community pool, passing my red diamond driveway every single time. The daily reminder of her failure must have been unbearable because she started taking her morning swims at 5:30 instead of 9:30, apparently hoping to avoid running into me. I made sure to adjust my garden watering schedule accordingly, always offering a cheerful wave when she walked past my property. The cherry on top came 2 months later when I noticed construction materials in Karen's driveway. It turned out she had applied to install decorative pavers of her own, hoping to upgrade from her plain concrete. The new HOA board, perhaps feeling a bit vindictive after her reign of terror, denied her application. The reason they cited was that her proposed design would violate the neighborhood's uniformity standards, the exact same argument she had tried to use against me. When I saw her reading the denial letter in her driveway, her face cycling through shades of red I didn't know were humanly possible, I couldn't help but add a small addition to my property. Right next to my gate, I installed a small brass plaque that read, "Private property, verified twice." Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or dramatic. Sometimes it's just a daily reminder, set in brass and red diamonds, that you tried to take what wasn't yours and failed spectacularly. Karen's legal fees from her failed crusade totaled over $15,000. The HOA board sent her a bill for an additional $8,000 to cover their attorney costs in defending against potential liability. Her reaction to the bills was so loud that 3 different neighbors called the police for a wellness check. She stood in her driveway, waving the invoices and screaming about injustice and conspiracy, until Officer Davidson gently suggested she might want to continue her protest indoors.